Alright, welcome back. Today we're going to look at the third lesson of our nervous system, which is dealing with and focusing on the support cells of the central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. So in the last lesson we left off talking about the four different types of support cells for the central nervous system, and then we also talked about the two different support cells for the peripheral nervous system. So our first support cell for our central nervous system, sometimes we refer to these as like the neuroglia. That's like an overarching term where we have different subcategories of support cells. The first category of support cell is the oligodendrocyte. One of my favorite words. Big surprise. Okay, so oligodendrocytes is how you say that. And the purpose of these cells are that they produce myelin sheaths around nerve fibers in the central nervous system. So with your oligodendrocytes, they are going to produce this myelin sheath. It's almost like a coating or a covering over the nerve fibers, and the job of the myelin sheath is to help speed up reaction time. Okay, so that is one of the ways that, or one of the reasons why our nerves react as quick as they do. The second support cell for the central nervous system is the astrocyte. So that prefix astro refers to like space and stars, and they are named after their shape because they have this star-like shape to them. That's pretty cool. And they're also very abundant in our nervous system. If we're looking at size, they are the largest neuroglia cell, so they're the largest support cell in our central nervous system. And their job is to help brace neurons, so they provide some structural support, and also they will form barriers between capillaries and neurons. Now, if you remember, capillaries is a type of blood vessel, and we'll get more into that throughout the year, but a capillary is a very small blood vessel. Arteries and veins are bigger blood vessels, which I know you've heard of those. So what happens is these support cells put up this barrier between your blood and your nerves. So that way some things cannot pass in, so certain toxins and metabolic waste cannot pass between the blood and the nervous system. Okay, there will be some things that can pass through them, so like anesthesia drugs, okay, different types of medications. Those will actually be able to pass through that blood, we call it the blood-brain barrier, but your normal like waste and natural bodily products will not be able to go between the blood and the nervous system. More to come on that in another lesson. And these astrocytes also help to control the chemical environment of the brain. So overall, they're monitoring how much metabolic waste there are, they're monitoring lipid production, carbohydrate management. So really, they're just taking a look, and they're monitoring and almost controlling the environment that your brain sits in and spinal cord too. Our third type of support cell, or third type of neuroglia, is the microglial cells. And these microglia cells have a kind of a spidery shape to it, and they are phagocytes. Okay, so if you remember phagocytosis, also known as cell eating, these are going to be neuroglia cells that are kind of like the trashmen of our nervous system. Okay, so kind of like my favorite, the lysosomes of the cells. Okay, these microglia cells, they're like the lysosomes for the nervous system. And the fourth type of support cell for the central nervous system is the ependymal cells. So ependymal cells, okay. And their job is to create cerebrospinal fluid to fill cavities and cushion organs. So your brain and your spinal cord are sitting in this watery fluid, okay, almost as like a oily, watery fluid. And that cerebrospinal fluid is important because it actually helps to provide cushion for your brain and cushion for your spinal cord. mainly because these two things, if you think about it, there's not any muscle surrounding these organs. There's not a lot of connective tissue surrounding these organs. Really, these organs are very close to the bones of either the skull or the bones of the vertebrae themselves. So we need this cerebrospinal fluid to help cushion those very important parts of our nervous system. Now, if we're moving into your peripheral nervous system, so all the other cells, or all the other nerves, these are going to be the support cells for the peripheral nervous system. Okay, so our first support cell is a satellite cell, and these satellite cells help to protect the neuron cell bodies, and they also help to supply nutrients to the surrounding neurons. So neurons are the main cell within the nervous system, and these satellite cells in the peripheral nervous system basically help to collect nutrients for and provide general support for those particular important neurons. And then, named after my favorite scientist as mentioned in lesson 2, the Schwann cells, they will form the myelin sheath in the peripheral nervous system. So here's that myelin sheath again. In our central nervous system, so in your brain and in your spinal cord, the oligodendrocytes are the ones that make the myelin sheath. Now, when we're in the rest of the body, in the peripheral nervous system, it's going to be the Schwann cells making the myelin sheath. So there are two different types of cells. The Schwann cells are not as complicated, okay, because your peripheral nervous system is not as complicated of structures as like your central nervous system is, but they have the same job. So two different cells, same job. And keep in mind that myelin sheath does help to increase the signal speed. And so when we look, and we'll get into neuron structure next week, but when we look, this purple dot that you see in here, okay, that is actually a cell, and that cell is producing the folds of this myelin sheath. So that would be a Schwann cell right there. Now with neurons, okay, if you've seen things like this before, okay, maybe in a psychology class, this is what we're going to be getting into in our next lesson. So we will be discussing some of this. Now if you've never taken psychology before, or maybe you didn't understand this as well in psychology, we will definitely go over this again, or you'll get to see it again when we go through this in our next lesson. Okay, so this lesson was just focusing on those 4 support cells of the central nervous system and the 2 support cells of the peripheral nervous system. As always, if you have any questions, email me, and I hope you guys are doing well. I will talk to you next time.